"Mom, you don't live here anymore." My own son said those words, standing in the doorway of the house I had paid for alone, with my bare hands and 15 years of quiet sacrifice. Strangers were carrying my furniture out while he watched. Cardboard boxes held the photographs I had hung on these walls when Tyler was still in primary school. A man I had never seen before was rolling my grandmother's cabinet toward a truck in the driveway. My daughter-in-law Claire stood just behind Tyler, arms folded, wearing the smirk of someone who had already won. "You signed the papers, Vanessa. The house belongs to us now." Neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk. I held my purse against my chest and pressed my lips together hard, so I wouldn't cry in front of them, because I had made myself one promise that morning. I was not going to give either of them my tears. Then I looked at the moving truck. And I noticed something. Something small. Something Tyler never expected me to see. In that moment, I knew exactly how this was going to end. My name is Vanessa Carter. I am 38 years old. And this is the story of how I lost everything, and then took it all back. I worked as a hospital billing clerk for nearly 15 years. I raised Tyler during those years by myself. No co-parent. No family money. Just my paycheck, my planning, and a deeply unfashionable habit of never spending what I hadn't earned. I gave up vacations. I wore the same winter coat for 6 years. I clipped grocery coupons at 11 at night after Tyler was asleep. Every small thing I denied myself went into a savings account I barely touched. And then one day, I bought a house. It wasn't large. It wasn't impressive. But it was mine. I stood in that empty living room on the first night, and I cried quietly, because I had built something real from almost nothing. Tyler went to college, married Claire, and became the kind of man people gathered around at family events. At those same gatherings, I had cooked the food and cleaned up afterward. Nobody said much to me. I was just the background. After a health scare last year, chest pains serious enough to hospitalize me for 4 days, I made the mistake of letting Tyler help manage my finances. I was tired and scared, and he was my son. I handed him the wheel because I trusted him the way you trust someone you raised, which is to say completely and without asking enough questions. That trust was the most expensive thing I ever gave away for free. Tyler introduced the refinancing paperwork on a Tuesday evening. He sat at my kitchen table with a folder and a patient voice and explained that the documents would protect me financially. He pointed to the lines. I signed where he pointed. The kitchen smelled like the pasta I had made for dinner. Everything felt normal. Safe. 3 weeks later, Tyler stood at a family barbecue and announced to a circle of relatives, loudly enough that I could hear, "Mom barely understands online banking." There was genuine laughter. I was sitting at the picnic table with a plate of food I had stopped tasting, and I felt something inside me go very, very still. Claire began moving through my house like a new owner. She threw away a box of my old photographs because they were cluttering the hallway. I found them in the recycling bin on a Wednesday morning, my son's school photos, pictures from a trip I took alone the year I finally paid off the mortgage. I stood by that bin in my bathrobe and held those photographs for a long time. Then I put them in my work bag. And I said nothing. One evening I heard Claire on the phone in the hallway. "Once the sale clears," she said softly, "she'll finally be out of our lives." She laughed after she said it, like I was a problem being solved. Tyler built a version of me, slowly, that was fragile and forgetful. And people who had known me for years began nodding along, because it was easier than asking questions. What Tyler never once considered was that I had spent years, real years, late-night quiet years, studying real estate law and property contracts. It started after I almost lost the house once before. I started reading property law forums and county deed records because I was terrified and there was no one to call at midnight. So I taught myself. Contract clauses, transfer authorizations, title chain documentation, filing deadlines. I became fluent in a language that looked boring from the outside. Tyler thought he was dealing with a woman who smiled and signed where she was told to. He had never once looked at my notebook. Then came a short email from someone connected to the title processing company. It said Tyler had made one critical error in the paperwork. One mistake. But in property law, one mistake like that is everything. I read that email 3 times. Then I called Elaine. Elaine Brooks had been my mentor at the hospital for 11 years, meticulous, with a decade in corporate compliance behind her. She read the documents at her kitchen table on a Sunday morning and didn't speak for almost 10 minutes. Then she said, "Vanessa, this isn't close. This is clear." She connected me with David Reyes, a property attorney. Together, the three of us built the case over 3 weeks. The original documents, the altered version, the email chain, the digital timestamp logs showing exactly when and from which device the modifications were made. The inconsistency was on page 3, a spacing irregularity, a font weight that shifted by half a point, an illegal transfer clause that required a second verified authorization signature that had never been properly obtained. Not the kind of thing you'd catch unless you were trained to look. I had trained myself to look. The closing date arrived. Tyler and Claire were already discussing something in low voices in the hallway when I walked in with Elaine and David Reyes. They stopped talking. Tyler recovered fast. "Mom, this doesn't have to be dramatic." David opened his folder without looking up. "Let's begin." He laid out the first document and explained, in a clear and unhurried voice, the forged authorization clause. He used the word forged. He didn't soften it. Claire's voice changed when she asked what it meant. The smoothness was gone. "It means," David said, "that this sale cannot legally proceed." Tyler leaned forward. "She agreed to all of this. She just forgets things." David slid the second set of documents across the table. A precise, verified timeline that dismantled Tyler's version of events sentence by sentence. And what Tyler didn't know until David mentioned it near the end. I had connected a family group call before the meeting. 6 relatives were on speakerphone listening in silence. Tyler's aunt, 2 cousins, the uncle who had laughed at the barbecue. They heard every word. Claire turned to Tyler with an expression I had never seen before. "You told me all of this was handled properly." Her voice was flat and cold. Tyler looked at me. For the first time in months, he looked at me like I was actually in the room. "I gave you a home," I said. "You tried to turn me into a stranger inside it." He broke quietly. "Mom, please don't press charges. Please." Then I told them the part none of them knew in full until that morning. Months earlier, I had quietly transferred the property into a protected family trust, correctly, legally, filed before Tyler ever listed the house. The house was never actually available for sale. Tyler had built an entire scheme on a foundation I had removed before he started building. The buyers withdrew before the meeting was over. Elaine looked at Tyler and said simply, "Intelligence doesn't always make noise." I kept my home. I revoked every access Tyler had to every account connected to my name. I repainted the hallway the color I had always wanted. I rehung every photograph Claire had thrown away. I bought a plant for the kitchen windowsill because I had always wanted one and kept telling myself later, betrayal from someone you raised carries a weight that nothing else quite matches. It doesn't feel like anger at first. It feels like discovering a crack in a wall you built carefully, one that came from the inside. But the house was never the real thing I was fighting for. The real thing was this: I am not background. I am not confusion. I am not someone whose quiet sacrifices disappear just because she made them without an audience. I am Vanessa Carter. I am 38 years old. And I built something once from almost nothing. Then I protected it. And nobody saw me coming. If someone ever treated your patience as an opening instead of a gift, share your story in the comments. Subscribe if you believe that standing up for yourself is not selfishness. It is survival. Click hype to help this reach someone who needs to hear it tonight.